Okay, well, thank you everyone for attending today's Downtown Neighborhood Safety Planning Testing meeting. My name is Laura Kaifas and I'm with Tempe's Neighborhood Services Office, and I'll be helping out with hosting today's meeting. With us from the staff today are Eric Iverson. He is the interim deputy deputy transportation manager, Shauna Warner, neighborhood services manager, and Herman Piedrahita, can never say that right, Herman, from traffic engineering. We will be recording, hopefully, this meeting, and that recording will be posted on tempe.gov/DNTSP. There you'll also find a lot of documents that'll be particularly helpful in case you maybe aren't totally up to speed or maybe don't remember some of the detail. This PowerPoint will be there, as well as the original planning document and a whole bunch of other stuff. Okay, so before we get started, some information on how to participate. After a brief presentation, we'll have a question and answer period. Please type your question into the chat, or you can click on the or hover over your name and raise your hand. If you're on your phone, you'll want to click on the chat button on the bottom. Okay, if there's a whole bunch of folks, I'm going to do my best to take everyone in order. Just be patient with us and we will get to you. Okay, I think that covers it. Eric, handing it over to you.
Thanks, Laura. Again, I'm Eric Iverson. I'm with the city and transportation. We have a short presentation to kind of give a little bit of a history on the project before we start taking questions. So I just want to run through these before I hand it over to Herman. Hopefully folks are familiar with this project. It's been going on since the spring of 2019, when the three neighborhood associations came together and submitted a grant application through the Marianne Corridor grant program, and were successful in getting monies to put together a study and ultimately a plan to look at reducing cut-through traffic and speeding in the three neighborhood associations. A consultant, a traffic engineering consultant, Y2K is the name of the team. They were hired to conduct that study. There was multiple public meetings, a steering committee meeting made up of representatives from each of the three neighborhood associations, continued to meet throughout the study and plan development. And that really leads us here today to test. We're talking about testing this plan. We'll get to what the test entails later on in the presentation, but that's what we're here today to present. So next slide. I think we're still waiting for the next slide, right?
Shauna, can you advance? Are you having an issue?
I advanced, but I will try the next one. Do you see that now?
Sometimes there's a delay.
Yeah, I think we have a delay going on.
So while we're waiting for it to advance, I can tell you that the three neighborhoods are Maple Ash, Wilson Art and Garden, and Mitchell Park. And the limits of those three neighborhoods, sort of the half square mile area that those three neighborhoods encompass, are University Drive on the north, 13th Street on the south, Mill Avenue on the west, and Hardy Drive, Mill on the east and Hardy on the west. And there is a map in the next slide if we can get it to advance.
I'm going to try and reclaim host role, see if that helps.
Okay. Thanks for everyone's patience as we work through the continuing technology struggles of the COVIDian times.
Yep. It is not letting me. Not had this one happen before, folks. This is new. Okay,
There we go.
tried a new,
Advanced. So, so these are the three. This is the quadrant. It's a half square mile that I just described. Again, it's the three neighborhood associations that came together to apply for this grant. And this is the project area that we're talking about: 13th Street on the south, Mill Avenue on the north, Hardy on the west, and Mill Ave on the east. And then next slide. Great. Just a little bit of history. I covered some of this, but you know, this is three neighborhood associations. This is meant to be a comprehensive plan. As many of you are aware, there's been lots of talk and some construction of traffic calming measures in the neighborhood for the last 15 to 20 years. And a lot of that was done sort of individually, individual streets and individual neighborhood associations. This is meant to look at comprehensively these three neighborhood areas and really, as I said in the previous slides, develop solutions for reducing speeding in the neighborhood, as well as cut through traffic. We want to, it's been a real purpose in the project to support continued ease of access for bicycle, pedestrian, and transit. There's an orbit route that runs through the neighborhood. So protecting those modes of travel has been important. There's been a lot, as I mentioned earlier, there's been a lot of public meetings. I think they were all virtual. There's been site visits with council members. There's been individual meetings with neighbors, property owners, businesses in the neighborhood that are attached to these neighborhoods. And so all those outreach efforts have been documented. They continue to happen as we get questions or comments on the project. So we will, as we always do in the city and with our neighborhood outreach, we will work with anyone that comes forward and wants to have more information about these projects. There was, as I mentioned, a steering committee made up of the three neighborhood representatives. And tonight, we are launching the next phase of the project, which is going into testing. We want to start that testing in February. It's really a simulation of what the permanent measures would or could be. And the council, just so everyone is aware, the city council, as of last year's budget cycle, had dedicated monies to go towards construction of this project. So that this project is funded, though we don't know what ultimately will be built or what those construction estimates would be. And then I think, yeah, next slide. We also want to mention, so that everyone's aware, neighborhoods, you know, all the neighborhood folks work with neighborhood services all the time, and probably a lot with transportation, but this project has reaches a lot of other areas because we're talking about possible street closures and partial closures. So we've been working with internally with other departments, the police department, fire department, solid waste that handles all of our recycle, bulk, and trash pickup. In addition, of course, to neighborhood services and traffic engineering at the city. So we do have representatives, as Laura mentioned, from traffic and neighborhood services and transportation. We also have representatives here tonight that can field any questions that you have related to police, fire, or solid waste. But we're coordinating all these departments to make sure that this project test phase goes as smoothly as possible, recognizing there will be hiccups, but we have the team put together to address those as they come up. And with that, I'm going to go to the next slide and hand it over to Germán Piedrahita, who is a senior civil engineer in traffic engineering, to walk through with you all where these measures are proposed, these different traffic calming, traffic mitigation measures are proposed in the neighborhood and what it means.
Thank you, Eric.
Yeah.
So you should be able to see the map. It identifies some of the existing traffic mitigation measures that you're familiar with, like the traffic circles and some of the existing speed humps. But we will be introducing three new measures, which is the diagonal diverter, the star diverter, and road closures. And these are the ones that you're going to encounter. These are the ones that are going to basically force a change in traffic patterns to address the issues with cut through and speeding. The the diagonal diverters are going to be, as you approach them, you have to only make left or right turns. The star diverter, as you can see on the right detail, you can only make right turns. And then the road closure, obviously it's a road closure to vehicle traffic, but all of these measures will be open to pedestrian crossing and for bikes. Next slide, please. So this is something like what you're going to see. The temporary measures are going to be done with water barriers and barricades, a little bit like what you see in construction. There will be signage to aid drivers and the traveling public on how to navigate around some of these. As Eric pointed out, the testing phase will begin February 1st, and we will run for 8 weeks, which puts us at the end of March. During that time, we're going to be, or prior to that time, we're going to collect speed and volume counts of the area, and then we will follow up with conducting volume counts and speed counts during the testing, probably about somewhere between 4 and 6 weeks in, when people are used to the new traffic patterns. Next slide, please. So this is where we are. We're in the second phase, which is the testing phase. After the 8-week testing phase, we will be putting together the pre-testing traffic data with the traffic data collected during the test, and we'll be putting together a report to provide to the neighborhood at the June public meeting, which will address the efficacy of these traffic mitigation measures at addressing the concerns of the neighborhood, and which are cut through and speeding. We will then move on to design in late summer and potential construction of some of these measures in early fall. Next slide, please. So this is what we're looking for you to have your input during the testing phase of your experience of, basically anything that you see out there. Please let us know. As Laura pointed out, there is the website for the project. You can leave comments there, or you can email or call me. There's my name. Probably should jot that down because it's kind of hard to spell out. And then also Laura, and we'll be happy to take comments. Next slide. And so we leave it to any questions that you may have regarding the testing phase of the project. And as Laura said, you could either type comments in the chat, or you can hover over your name and raise your hand, and we will call on you.
Okay. Another thing I want to mention is that to get good data, we have asked that there be no construction in this area during this time. So you will notice, that there will be no other barricades other than the ones that we've set out there. Typically, as you probably are aware, there's always all kinds of utilities doing work and that sort of thing. And we've asked for a brief moratorium during that 8-week testing phase. I also want to point out that we have some other staff here with us. We have Steve White from Municipal Utilities. Terry Pecars is also in the audience. He is the director of that department, Municipal Utilities. And we have Kevin from Fire. So if any questions that you have pertain to those departments, we have them here. Okay, I see some things popping in the chat.
And Laura, just so you know, there are questions in the Q&A as well. So let me know if you need me to read those.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to start with the chat, and then we'll go back to the Q&A if that's okay with everybody. Okay, we have a question. What kind of signage will you have at the borders of the neighborhoods to alert drivers that streets don't go through anymore? That's a good question.
I can take that one.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so what the testing phase is trying to avoid is that traffic that's going to cut through. At the point of the diverters or the closures, we are providing signage for residents to basically maneuver into the new traffic patterns. but we felt that if we were to sign the outside, it kind of works against the goal of what we're trying to do. We're trying to minimize cut through traffic. So the people that we want navigating the neighborhood are the people that live in the neighborhood or have a direct destination within the neighborhood.
And if I could just add to that, this is Eric. Part of the reason why we test is to understand how everyone responds to it. And so, and we will have, especially in the first couple of weeks, we will be monitoring pretty closely. So if there's additional signage or changes in how devices are set up, we can tweak that. So we're prepared to add or delete information as needed.
Okay, I'm going to go next to the next one in the chat before we go to Q&A. Will there be any measures to reduce traffic by the Chick-fil-A? Cars line up for the drive-thru on Maple and it becomes very congested.
Kathy or Herman, you guys want to take that?
Sure. Sorry, I got lost with the different screens. So at that location, we actually have a diagonal diverter. I'm bringing up the map to.
Yeah, the diagonal diverter is at 9th and Ash.
I'm sorry, it's a 9th and Ash, correct.
Yeah.
So we don't have a measure on Maple. We have what the streetcar constructed, and they're reducing the traffic that might come from westbound and making the movement predominantly eastbound to south. But we don't have any devices on Maple in that stretch.
Yeah, we do. So that's just to confirm, I don't know who asked the question, but that's the block on Maple, between 9th and University. And Herman's correct, there's nothing on that particular block. There is the next block south. There's a closure on the south side of 10th Street on Maple. And then there's a diverter at 9th and Ash. This plan was put together to sort of comprehensively look at where you would reduce that cut through traffic. And so with these two streets, we kind of looked at them together. The consultant looked at them together, and there's not a measure specifically in front of Chick-fil-A, but Maple and Ash are addressed with those two measures that we talked about. And then Laura, Kathy Hollow, our city traffic engineer, if you could give her the ability to be unmuted if possible.
Yeah.
She may have comments to jump in and add to what Herman and me are saying.
Gotcha. I didn't see Kathy there because she just had her name as Kathy, and you're not sure yet, Kathy. Also, we have Cheryl. I know you're waiting and that you'd like to speak. We will get to you as well, just to let you know. Go ahead.
I also just one more thing want to add. We have had a couple meetings with Chick-fil-A, whoever asked the question, and they're aware of the study. They're aware of some of the concerns that have been brought forward. We of course want them to continue to do the business they need to do, but they're aware of the effort that this plan is looking at.
Okay, let's keep rolling with the questions. We have a few popping up. Is the future multimodal path along Farmer included in your planning, and how?
So I can take that one. This is what was formerly known as the pathway formerly known as North-South Rail Spur Path. It is being re-characterized, redesigned as a pathway and street access on adjacent to the railroad streets. Farmer, Roosevelt, kind of depends on where you're at in the north-south corridor there. But the short answer is yes, we are coordinating. That project is getting ready to go back out to the public this spring or summer. And this plan would take into consideration what's happening with that plan and vice versa. As I said earlier, the that project that is referenced is meant to be a bicycle pedestrian access pathway or corridor. And this plan that we're talking about tonight that's being tested is also meant to be bike, retain and promote bike ped access through the area. So I think they work in concert with each other.
Thanks, Eric. Okay, we have another one. What is the preferred route that we are trying to divert traffic to for those who live between 13th and Broadway and need to get north?
Is this me again? I would let Kathy or Herman answer, but essentially,
No, I can answer, Eric. Sorry,
Yeah.
it just takes me a moment to unmute. Sorry. Um, Basically the main routes for travel out of the neighborhood should be your Hardee's, your 13th Street, your Mill Avenue. That's where we're trying to push traffic that is not going to a destination within the neighborhoods. How about that? Go for it, Derek.
Yeah, no, that's good. I mean, and then it's your collector streets. These are the intention of the plan is these are neighborhood streets. The collector streets and the arterial streets. Collectors are like 13th and Hardy, like Herman mentioned, but your arterial streets like University and Mill, those are the corridors that are meant to take on a little bit more traffic.
Okay, here's another one for Herman. How will the barricades for road closures be set up to allow bicyclists to easily pass through? For example, what is the width of the opening being planned? Will the openings be wide enough to accommodate recumbent bikes?
Yes. So right now we have some of the devices. If you look, for instance, at Ninth and Ash, or if you can see on the map, kind of where we have the diagonal diverters and the star diverter, we already kind of marked those out in the street on the pavement. But when they're putting out the actual water barriers and such, we will provide those openings in. I think it's Ninth and Ash is probably going to be the tightest area, and I think we get 4 to 4.5 feet for bikes near the pedestrian ramps. And then as we move west with the devices, we'll be able to provide more room. But yes, we are providing space for cyclists, usually on both sides of the street.
Okay, Cheryl's been waiting patiently. Cheryl, I've unmuted you.
Oh, you have. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for all the efforts. I'll admit I was struggling in the beginning to try to log on. I do notice there is a color difference between gray, green, and yellow. To be fair, you probably mentioned what that meant, and I just didn't hear it.
Gray, green, and yellow on the map?
On the map. So Mill to Farmer is gray, Farmer to Roosevelt is green, and Roosevelt to Hardy is yellow.
Those are the different neighborhood association boundaries.
Okay.
Yeah.
So was the plan done like at the beginning of the pandemic, or was it just most recently? I know all this stuff takes a lot of time. The
Yeah.
only reason I mention it is because the pandemic has brought a lot of vehicles that are invited into the neighborhood, and it just feels like we're a community that's transitioning to service deliveries. It could be through a ride share. It might be Uber Eats. It could be grocery deliveries from the grocery store. It might be, and that's in addition to like a landscaper or someone repairing your fence or the plumber. But it just, I know my
Yeah.
street has Amazon,
Sure.
FedEx, UPS every single time, multiple times, by the way.
Yeah.
So one of the things that just jumps out at me, like just knowing and seeing that, is I notice at Ninth and Roosevelt, we have a plan to close it so that effectually it becomes a cul-de-sac if you're coming off of University. I mean, I don't disagree in that that definitely should help to keep unwanted traffic out, but it just makes me wonder if we're closing it too early, and only because, you know, some people desire a signalized intersection when in fact you're trying to turn, left. I'm trying to actually make a safe turn because sometimes the traffic can be quite busy if it's during certain times of the day on University. And so I guess that's really, it's really my only comment. I guess it's not really up for debate because, like I said, I do agree that if our whole goal is really to try to keep people out, that probably will do it. But it just makes me wonder if it's just closing it too early, or if the previous, question of, is there a street to get us from 13th to University? Is there one in there that we do want to try to keep open? I don't know. I don't know.
So I can take part of that question at least, Cheryl. We started planning for this pre-pandemic. So, conditions have changed a lot since the pandemic, but we honestly started this project in 2019, I do believe, early 2019. And things were different. And so we are going to need to reassess as things go on. But, traffic is traffic. Yeah, it will probably take a little longer for, the delivery vehicles, but they will figure it out as well, just like the residents. And Herman, I don't know if you want to take the second part of Cheryl's question.
Sure. I do, like you said, the traffic study was performed during the pandemic, but the consultant looked at volumes from previous years, which is how they identified or at least pointed to some of these potential cut-through routes. And that's the important thing about testing it now. As traffic is starting to build back up, we'll be able to see what it does and what these measures accomplish. So as far as whether it's too close to University, um, it could be. I mean, there was a choice made there. If you go a little farther from University, it could welcome more cut-through traffic because they think they could get farther into the neighborhood before they have to be diverted. So it could work both ways, and that's something that we'll be able to see with the data of of the testing phase.
Okay, here's another one. Why not make use of the alleys south of the commercial area, but north of the residential uses?
So as far as the alleys, they're not really made to take on heavy volumes. Also, they're not wide enough, and the surfaces are not there for heavy volume of traffic. Some of them are 90-degree turns, and they're pretty tight turns. So we don't typically want to use those for as a replacement for a street. And that brings up a good point. We are actually taking some counts that will tell us how much traffic is going down those alleys before and after. We already see some evidence of people cutting through alleys just by the looking at the surface conditions. But we definitely don't want to encourage street traffic to use the alleys. They're just not made to handle that traffic.
Make them able to handle that traffic.
Well, that would be another challenge.
Yeah,
We
It's-
probably need about 5 to
I'm
10
not-
feet on either side of the alley.
I didn't hear that.
That we'd have to widen the alleys to be able to make them traffic safe.
Okay,
They have traffic now, so they're traffic safe now.
but they're not considered a street, I think is what Herman's trying to allude to. I mean, even our solid waste vehicles sometimes have a hard time with the narrow alleys, and they certainly aren't set for a two-way. Let's see, someone has asked if I can show the panelists or the participants, and I do not have that capacity on this. Let's see, that we answered. Here's another one. I would prefer to see the closure at Maple and 10th move to the alley. I think we just addressed that. During the construction for the water main replacement, Frustrated and angry drivers often were speeding through the neighborhood. Sounded pedal to the metal. I'm concerned that people attempting to cut through the neighborhood will create a serious speed safety problem, especially for families and young children. Will there be increased police presence during this testing phase? Not sure who best to take that one.
I can take that call.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Lieutenant Still with the police department, and I represent the field operations. At this point, we do not see this impacting any police services. However, if there are specific complaints or concerns, we certainly open and invite residents to form complaints through our selected enforcement operations. And if the need arises, we can certainly redirect our resources towards those particular streets and areas. So if something is noted, we would certainly welcome and would want to hear from you guys if you guys need additional enforcement during specific days and hours, and we can hopefully assist you with that time.
Okay. Thanks for that. Okay, we have another question. This person's concerned about cutting off the residential areas north of 10th in the Maple Ash neighborhood from the hood south of 10th. What discussion has there been about that? I don't know, maybe Eric, do you want to take that
Yeah,
one?
I mean, I can add some feedback on that. It's not this plan, as I understand it, you know, from the steering committee as well as how the city looks at it, is not meant to cut off any area, any part of any, you know, neighborhood from the other. It's meant to reduce the cut through traffic, if not eliminate it. And really kind of keep the neighborhood streets with just neighborhood traffic. So a closure still retains, you know, closures that are proposed or diverters that are proposed still retains that bike ped access, and is meant to kind of to spread out throughout the neighborhood these devices so that it's really comprehensively reducing that cut through traffic. These were placed, you know, very specifically to address each block. So they're not meant to cut off one part of the neighborhood from the other. It's meant to equally reduce the cut through traffic.
Thanks for that, Eric. Here's
And I don't know
another.
if Kathy or Herman have other comments on that.
Okay, if not, we kind of addressed this a little bit, but the question is, will this increase alley traffic?
I'll take that one. And also wanted to agree with everything that Eric just said regarding cutting off any neighborhood from the other. It could potentially increase traffic on some of the alleys, and this is why we're going to collect data to see where traffic goes. You know, there's a lot of things that we could do to try to direct traffic. Something as simple as a speed limit sign is advising what the safe speed is, but not everyone is going to follow that. So this is sort of, you know, it's very much the same. It's just they're physical. I don't want to say barriers, but they're physical diversions of traffic. And there will be some drivers that will try to find a way around some of these measures. And so that's where we're going to be collecting the data to see where it goes. And, you know, that's something that we're going to take into consideration, whether the traffic measure did what it needed to do or did it cause an issue somewhere else. And that's what we're going to present to the neighborhood.
And we will be collecting data on the alleys as well. I don't know if Herman mentioned that. Okay, here's a good question. Will this mitigation plan be given to Google Maps to update the directions that are given to navigate this area? I don't know quite how that works. I think they automatically recognize barriers, but that's something we can definitely look into. I don't know if Eric or Herman, if you know more about that, or Kathy.
I mean, eventually, whatever becomes permanent would eventually get picked up.
Yeah.
But we have not proactively at this point. It's a great question.
Yeah,
Because we have not proactively, I don't know where we start, but we will certainly look into that. It's the same coordination that we're doing with, all the other departments to work with them, because it changes traffic flow, it changes access points. So, yeah, we can look at that.
Well, and in some sense, the testing period is temporary traffic control devices, which is pretty much what you may see on say we have a construction of a water line and we have to close your street. So because it's temporary, we haven't done that part. But as we move on with whatever the plan is that we move on with, that is something that has to be shared, because the Google and the Wazes of the world are also going to help us to send traffic away from the neighborhood. They're going to identify these areas and they're going to help us reduce cut through traffic. Fingers crossed.
Okay, we had another comment, I guess you'd call it. Why not take the width property from the commercial properties to make the alleys wide enough for the traffic? Please do not write off this idea of using alleys for diverting traffic. I have experienced neighborhoods with street closures. It may not be meant to cut off parts of the neighborhood, but it does so. Using the alleys is a strategy for avoiding this.
I'm speaking specifically in Maple Ash.
I think that's Jenny. Jenny, we certainly, I'm hearing that, I think it's Jenny that's saying that, Jenny Lucier. We're certainly hearing the comment, and it's, as we all know, Maple Ash is different than Wilson Art and Garden, and definitely different than Mitchell Park, so different set of issues. I think that Maple Ash has. And the alleys, I mean, we all know what's happened behind CVS and Chick-fil-A. So Herman mentioned we're going to be studying what happens with the alleys during this test. And there may be measures or some engagement with the alleys. I think we got to be really careful. We don't want to create another problem. And I think we have to be careful. The alleys are generally behind folks' houses, and that's a whole nother issue. So I think it's a point taken, and part of the reason why we test is to understand how people react to proposed changes. And we're going to be paying close attention to that, and what specifically happens in the alleys.
And I think your answer, Eric, kind of applies to this next question, but I'm going to read it anyway, just so he knows that we saw him. Is there any study to see the load on and around Chipotle on 11th Street and Mill? This place has high load of street parking overspill from Chipotle, and the 11th Street entrance exit to Chipotle is always busy. At least half a dozen times folks have approached me, resident on the corner, asking if I had cameras because their car was hit and run. Could we study traffic use in this dense area, since it is also pedestrian traffic to ASU entrance as well?
So that's why we do the traffic counts. So we're doing this month counts to see what kind of volumes are out there. And it's not unlike the conversation we had about the Chick-fil-A north of this location. We're going to be observing what happens, and pre-installation of tests, and we have the data from the counts from a year and a half ago, and then we'll take additional counts and during the test to see what happens with, do these measures that we're talking about here address the issue that's been identified of cut through traffic, and specific to that intersection as well, 11th and Mill.
Okay, so I'm going to jump back to the chat. Some people have been putting things up there, so thanks for your patience. Will there be any additional enforcement for the traffic that continues to go through University on Ash? Currently, traffic is supposed to turn either east or west while heading both south and north. I think yes, we are aware that that is a problem there. Does anyone want to address that intersection?
I think that with the diverter at 9th Street and Ash, we may see some of that reduction because some of the traffic that's going through there is cut through traffic, and they're trying to avoid either Mill and University or some other intersection. And so we should be able to see some of that, but we've been trying different things with the intersection to try to reduce that. And it seems like we're successful for a little bit or intermittently. We'll keep trying to see what we can do in that intersection, but unfortunately, we haven't been able to solve it just yet. But we're aware of the issue, and we'll see how it goes during the testing phase. This might actually help. This might be something that helps down the line to address that cut through issue.
We're also waiting on that particular intersection. We're waiting for the operations of the streetcar to begin in full force, and that'll be at the end of March, beginning of April. And that will inform us on, you know, what, if anything, needs to change there. We hear, I bike through that intersection almost every day. I think we're all aware of, you know, the non-compliance that happens. And there's a lot of non-compliance with traffic laws all over the city. You know, how many people actually drive the speed limit? But yes, we are aware of that particular intersection and the issues that are being brought up. And, you know, we're sort of going incrementally. We're going to see how this plan affects that intersection. We're also waiting to see the operations of the streetcar and the introduction of, you know, a different cycle, a different phase on that signal that will, you know, add another layer of complexity that we want to wait to address until after that operation is observed.
Okay, another question. Has anything been considered for changes to the 13th and Mill/Apache intersection?
So not as part of this project. It's something that could come down the line. Again, the traffic data will kind of tell us where traffic goes, and if you know, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but if we see a change in patterns, if we see an increase on 13th, you know, it could potentially trigger something down the line, but nothing at this time and not under this project. This project is strictly for the internal traffic patterns of the neighborhood.
Thanks, Herman. And we have just a comment here. I live on Maple and I very much support the closure at Maple and 10th. Another comment, I like it. This is going to make bicycling and walking safer and more enjoyable. Looking forward to seeing the traffic data. It feels like most of the issues stem from 13th Street, either traffic from University trying to cut across to 13th or people using 13th to avoid University or other major streets. Why no mitigation measures on 13th to reduce traffic flows and speeds there?
So it's correct in that assumption is that's why people are cutting through. They're trying to, I think Kathy was going to speak. Did you want to say something, Kathy, ahead of me?
I'm going to say Laura might want to jump in on this one because we did just add 2 speed cushions to 13th as part of a different grant project. So that just happened within the last year, right, Laura?
They have been approved, but they have not been installed. We're waiting for that water line project to finish.
Oh, yes, that's right. We had to finish one thing before we can start another. Okay, but yeah, we have 2 speed humps going in on 13th, so.
That is correct.
And what we're trying to do with this project is encourage traffic to 13th and Hardy and University and Mill and not to cut through the neighborhood.
But to slow it down is our hope. So
And to
hence
slow
the
it down.
speed.
Correct.
Yeah. So there was a question earlier and maybe we've answered it, maybe we haven't been quite clear enough, but there's 2 kind of goals, 2 main goals, both cut through and speed. So, you know, this does a little bit of both. So in case someone didn't feel their question got asked. Here's another one. It just seems that residents need to learn the roads. It turns our neighborhood into a bit of a maze. Cut through people will not know how to get through and residents will know how to get where they need to go. I see this as a positive thing to decrease problems in our neighborhood. It will certainly be a learning curve for all of us. Okay. Another person says 13th Street is the neighborhood. Yes, you are right. There are homes that front it.
Indeed, and what I was going to say too is we're not, 13th Street is a collector street. It's meant to carry, it's built and meant to carry a little bit more volumes. We don't want to discount those neighbors that live there too. Hardy Drive has a similar thing. Both those streets have also had some traffic calming in the last 20 years. I think 13th Street was about 15 years ago and Hardy was about 10 years ago. We're certainly going to be watching what happens on those streets as well. And we don't want to, as I said earlier, you don't want to create unintended consequences. We want to make sure that we're not, pushing a problem, elsewhere. So we're going to be monitoring what happens on 13th Street. I suspect that 13th is sometimes used as the street that gets you to the neighborhood street to cut through. So I suspect that if you can't use the neighborhood streets to cut through, like say from University to 13th Street, because you're avoiding Mill Avenue, 13th Street volumes, the actual traffic levels may go down. But again, that's why we're testing. We want to understand what happens at 13th Street and the neighbors that live there as well.
Okay, and here's another question back to the Q&A. So the streetcar construction at Ashland University will be going on during our testing phase. There are still no electric lines.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry if I wasn't clear. No, streetcar construction is done. We're talking about, we want to understand and make sure that streetcar operations works well when it's running, when it's taking passengers. So right now we're just testing the streetcar. It's going to be going through that intersection many times in an hour, and that's going to change how people utilize that intersection. We think it could potentially discourage, having the streetcar moving through that intersection could discourage and kind of reinforce the signage out there that says you can't go north and south driving a car. So we want to make sure that we fully understand how people are responding to that intersection after streetcar has been operating before we make decisions on how to move forward with any potential modifications to that intersection.
Thanks, Eric. Here's another one about speed
Hey,
humps.
Laura,
Yes.
sorry. We have 3 people that have been waiting patiently with their hands raised. I don't know if you want to take them next and then
Okay.
go back to the questions. Linda was first, then Jenny, then Riley.
Absolutely. Let me just get this last one in the chat and then we'll hop over that way. Thanks, Shauna. This one is about the speed humps on Judd. I think this one might be for Kathy. I'm not sure. Are these okay, I'll just read the question. Where are the approved speed humps that are supposed to be installed on Judd? Now, I'm not sure if those are part of this plan or are they pre-plan or outside of this plan. I can unmute you, Ira and Carol.
Try and mute. There you go.
Are we good?
Yep.
We
Go
can hear
ahead.
you.
We had speed humps approved between 12th Street and Judd, and I had actually spoken with you previously, Laura, and you had said that they would probably be rolled into this project, and I'm not seeing them. So I don't want them to be left out if they're supposed to be part of this.
They're not appearing here on this map, but they are still part of this plan. So speed humps are something that we're not actually going to test because you can't really test.
Okay, so that they haven't been forgotten. That would be my concern.
No.
And
Yeah,
since you unmuted me, can I say that, Eric, that you talked about the intersection of Ashland University? Part of the question was the fact that unless it's changed, the electric wires are not up. That's the only place there's no electric wires. Has that changed? And are they going to do that during our test session?
That's a battery operated portion of the streetcar route. So there's no overhead wires there.
Oh,
There's
okay.
Essentially on Mill Avenue and on Mill Avenue downtown, and then University Drive and a portion of Ash and Rio Salado have no overhead wires, and the streetcar will be running on a battery. So there's no wires going in there.
I was waiting for the wires to show up. So thank you for explaining that.
Yeah.
Okay. And we're going to take the folks that had their hands up. I can see why I didn't see them because they're not yellow for some reason. They are like gray. So let's start with Riley, then we'll go to Jenny, then Linda. Riley, you're unmuted.
Hi. So as someone who lives in the campus homes neighborhood and also on 13th, obviously I have concerns about increased traffic on 13th, but also just how me and my neighbors are going to get out of the neighborhood. And so it seems like there's a lot of things that restrict traffic, but not anything that helps traffic flow more freely. So I did ask about the Mill Avenue 13th. You know, that I think the double left there is really restrictive, especially like if you're in the campus homes neighborhood and you're just trying to get to Whole Foods. Having to take a double left and then a left again on University just is a really lengthy process. But also going all the way over to Hardy is quite a bit out of your way. So that was kind of what I'm asking about. Is there anything that's being done to try to make certain routes more accessible rather than just making a lot of routes inaccessible?
So I'll take that. I would say if you look at this map and you hear the messages that have been coming out of this plan and out of this test phase, it's really throughout this entire half square mile. It's, you know, these north, south, and east, west streets are testing this idea of it's more difficult to get through the neighborhood in a car. So that's kind of the short answer to that. So I understand what you're saying. This does require new routes if you're driving. For everyone living here in the neighborhood and those adjacent, it requires new routes to get in and out of the neighborhood, because you just can't use, you know, any one street to get north or south or east or west entirely. So that was kind of the purpose overall of, you know, one of the purposes overall of the plan itself and the conversations that happened in the last couple of years. There's also not, just one more thing, there's also not any one particular street that was identified to say, okay, this is where the traffic would go, other than the collectors and the arterials. So for example, Farmer Ave, Farmer and Ash, I think, have the highest volumes north and south. Those two streets they kind of absorb that neighborhood, you know, that kind of cut through traffic or neighborhood traffic today. And the intention was to disallow that cut through traffic with this potential plan.
And can you define what the cut through traffic is? Because at the beginning you mentioned that, you know, we want to allow people who live in the neighborhood to access the neighborhood, but try to discourage cut through traffic. But it seems to me that much of what would be defined as cut through traffic is people who live in the neighborhood just getting in and out. And what is now that traffic that is spread amongst all of this grid would then be focused only on 13th and Hardy, really.
So I can.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so the way that it was identified is the cut through route. What it is basically is a vehicle that doesn't make a stop within the neighborhood, but it's entering the neighborhood and leaving the neighborhood, not going to the neighborhood. You can stop me if I'm talking in circles, sorry. But basically it's literally that. There is no destination within the neighborhood. They're using the neighborhood streets to get elsewhere.
Is there a, sorry to interrupt, is there like a route that has been determined as where people are going and where they're going and coming from, or what route they're taking through the neighborhood?
So sort of two parts to that. As the plan is presented, the routes are the universities and the mills and the Hardys, but what we're looking at during this testing phase is it's going to tell us where that traffic goes. We're going to be looking at the surrounding areas, and you know, we're like, for instance, 13th Street, and we're going to see where that traffic goes. And one thing that I didn't point out, which may be obvious to a lot of you, is we're collecting data, hard data, as far as the volumes and the speeds, but we're also going to be out there observing. And just like the residents are going to be giving us feedback, we're going to go out there and we're going to observe to see how some of this is working. And so then after that, we'll be able to kind of at least have an idea of where else the traffic will go. I hope that kind of answers your question.
Okay, we've got some more folks, so let's move on to Jenny, then Linda, then Raja.
Yeah, I think I ended up writing most of my things in the question and answer, but I guess I would ask people, such as the prior speaker, which I don't know what his name is, but to specify when speaking about getting in and out of the neighborhood, specify, is that by car? Is that by bicycle or walking or whatever else, you know?
I was speaking about car, by if you're commuting to work or
Yeah, I just think it would be helpful for this discussion for all of those things to be specifying when you're speaking about it. So other than that, I'm passing because I've actually put everything in my comments.
Thanks, Jenny. Linda, I think your hand is down, but did you want an opportunity before I move on to Raja?
No, thank you. That was accidental.
Okay. Well, it's really hard to see folks with raised hands on this new look. It's literally black on black. So Raja, would you like to speak? I will unmute you.
Sure, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. Yeah, so I did type in my question and Eric answered it. I was the one that brought up the point about 11th Street in Chipotle, and I live right there. My concern was I heard that the traffic study was not to include that intersection, but I may be wrong. So either that, but I do want to stress that ASU kids go across now the what is that, light rail or what that's called is going to be very busy. There's a station right across from Chipotle. Anybody and everybody going to ASU and Gamage, even non-ASU students or faculty, but outside people who come to Gamage, they all use that intersection. But mainly Chipotle is busy from morning till night. And like I said, people are asking about, cameras and evidence for hit and runs and little things. And I'm afraid that something shouldn't happen to a pedestrian or student or some kind of speeding. I see people speed in and out as well when they get a chance. So is there a speed cushion or something we can do from Maple to 11th Street right in front of Carol's home or something like that to tell people? I'm not sure what the solution is, but I just wanted to bring that attention up, not just because I'm there. I don't have a problem parking or leaving and coming, but I do see from out my window quite a lot of things that can go wrong if things get unfortunate. So just heading it off, and I wanted to know if that intersection has any attention from the city for study.
So it was part of the original study. So that was looked at. Yeah. Now,
Okay.
as far as what measures are going there, that's another story. But yes, it was examined.
Yeah, we'll take your feedback about the potential speed hump or speed cushions or multiples of those and take that in consideration. But I think what I'm saying, Raja, is that we're gonna, because we're doing, it's like upwards of 30 locations where we're tracking the volume of cars and the speed of cars. We have that data from a year and a half ago. We're going to collect that data again. And in and around that particular area as well. I'm not sure if we have one on 11th or we have one on Maple, but we'll look at that. So we'll know what the volumes are out there today at 11th and Mill, really 11th and Maple. And then we'll see how the test phase affects that as well. We'll know pretty quickly that if the one street becomes particularly bad, and something else needs to be done. So we're gonna be observing that intersection and all the others to see how this test phase addresses the issues.
Okay, great. That's great. Thank you.
Okay, and we did have a question about is this being recorded? Yes, it is. And we will post it on our website, tempe.gov/DNTSP. So that'll take us about 24 hours usually to get it to download. Anybody else? Happy to unmute you. if I can see you. And you can probably unmute yourself as well.
I don't see any more, Laura.
Okay, good. Well, I want to thank everybody. This was a good discussion and gives us all, some more things to think about. We'll be in touch. We're not going anywhere. We're going to probably post some more signs in the neighborhood that address not just that there's a meeting tonight, but emphasize the QR code and the website to provide us with comments. Anyone else? We're just after 7 o'clock.
What are the closures and some of these blockages gonna actually look like?
Okay, let me take you back to that slide. So they're going to be these water-filled barriers or these type of.
I'm sorry. The final, like the actual permanent.
Oh, gotcha. That is still to be determined. There's a whole design phase that'll have to take place. Once we decide, once we look at all the data and see what makes sense. So it could be a whole number of things.
I don't know if it sounds like it was Riley, if I remember the name right, asking the question. So Riley, you're probably familiar with the circles in the neighborhood, the other devices that exist in the neighborhood that have trees or a little bit of landscaping, sometimes public art. Those would all be things that would be potential for a closure or a diverter as well. Obviously the design, I would hope, would be a lot more aesthetically pleasing than what you're seeing on the slide here. But and Laura's correct, these would be designed after we determine what's going to be built. And that would be a more public process.
Yes, and some of those will be better options for the city as well. For example, if there's some way to use hydraulic barriers that we could have a remote for our trash trucks or fire department, that sort of thing, gives us a lot more flexibility. These water-filled barriers are kind of clunky. They're not very pretty, but they do the trick. They're the best we can do on a temporary basis. Anybody else? Well, if that's it, we can close it tonight. I want to thank everybody for coming. Thanks for your comments, and please feel free to go to our website and enter more if you have them, or to call or email either Herman or myself. There's our info again, and it's probably on the postcards you received. It'll be on the signage in your neighborhood as well. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.